So thank you, and thank you, Trevor. So it's funny, I did my dissertation at Kessler, so they support really the entire spectrum of training, and they were a fantastic program with whom to work. So Lloyd alluded to a little bit of this earlier, and I just want to thank Fabrizia and all of the AR3T. This is a program that NIH supports and through a collaborative mechanism, and it's part of the infrastructure that we hope supports, as I'm very glad to hear, pilots, training, infrastructure for the field to encourage this type of work to continue. So let's see if this will advance. Okay, I have nothing to disclose. I work for the federal government, and if you really want to see what I earn, you can FOIA it, because I have to report it on a regular basis. So I took this from a recent GAO report just to give you a sense of the level of support that the National Institutes of Health has for regenerative medicine. We have a fairly significant part of the $2.89 billion investment from 2012 to 2014 with support from our sister agencies, the Departments of Defense, Veterans Affairs, and the National Science Foundation. There are other smaller programs, but I think NIH is probably the big dog in the room when it comes to regenerative medicine. Okay. So, really, what do we feel like is needed across the NIH? And I will tell you, I'm going to blow through a lot of programs just so you get a sense of the scope, and it's not exhaustive. But really, what is needed? And as many of you have talked about, we really do need the basic science. We need the cell mechanisms and responses. We need to understand vascularization. We have to get to innervation. We have to understand signaling. We have to know what the scaffolds are that are going to help us to put this into practice. We also need the technology, right? And that even goes to computational models and different ways that we can look at the data related to regenerative medicine approaches, as well as the scalability of the technologies, right? Because some of these are very particular applications. They're not ready for wide-scale clinical application. And then also really looking at what's going to happen when we put this into clinical application. There are going to be issues, just as there have been in some of the studies that have had to be closed down because of some of the issues related to immune responses that have gone wrong, right? And it's taken us some time to build back from those initial failures. So I'm going to highlight a couple of trans NIH initiatives. The biggest one that we have right now is the Regenerative Medicine Initiative. And so in 2019, there is a plan to put out $28 million across a number of different initiatives. They're all being published by Heart, Lung, and Blood, and they're due very soon. Some of them due October 19th, others due November 9th, and they're both for small businesses as well as for academic institutions. But I would expect to see other initiatives coming out. I think I got this out to the community through Fabi as much as I could. But we are really supporting clinical research on adult stem cells. This is coordinated with FDA. This is a weird one too for us. We don't usually do this, but Congress asked us to do this with matching funds from recipients. So we give you half the money, and then you have to kind of get the other half from your institution or your state. And this is actually how some of the defense manufacturing institutes are being run right now as well. So there are similar ways that these are being done. So if you want to follow this, if you go onto the Common Fund page and you type in Regen, it'll come up. The other thing to let you know is that there's an enormous effort, which I have been working on for the past 2 days while I have been here, called the HEAL Initiative, which is helping to end addiction long term. There are two facets of this, one to look at opioid misuse and addiction, the other to enhance pain management. Now, you say to yourselves, why am I talking about this here at the Regen meeting? One of the major areas of emphasis for this is in novel treatments or novel approaches to pain, and or looking at biomarkers, or looking at the ways that we can address tissue loss that causes pain, peripheral neuropathies, low back pain, etc. Some of the things that you all are talking about in terms of the muscle, nerve, right, bone aspects of pain can potentially fit some of these initiatives. So I would encourage you to look at some of the basic science things that are coming out of this initiative. They will be coming fast and furious. All of the monies have to be obligated this year. So I would follow this page. There's new ones out right now on biomarkers and novel targets for treatment and omics. And there's also a notice to publish for a back pain consortium, which will include cellular mechanisms as well as repair strategies. The other thing that's coming is looking at acute to chronic pain signatures and following the signals that have somebody transfer from acute to chronic pain. A lot of this involves some of the signaling pathways that you all study. And so when I'm looking at some of your presentations today and some of the cellular aspects of repair of muscle, repair of nerve, some of those are the same things that are involved in pain generation in a chronic phase. So this is something that I think folks should look at. This is being run through the Common Fund by the Pain Consortium, but using HEAL money. And there will be more of the HEAL to come. So the other thing I'm now going to just really quickly blow through, because there's a lot of them, are the different institutes and centers and some of their interests in regenerative rehabilitation specifically. So one of our co-authors on the Journal of the Nature Journal, the Regenerative Medicine paper is Fei Wang, and she is the NIAMS Regenerative Rehab lead. She does the Musculoskeletal Tissue Engineering Regenerative Medicine program, and she is really looking at a number of things related to musculoskeletal tissues as well as the biology of fracture repair and healing. And I can make these slides available to you all. The National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering has a very robust regenerative program. The program contact there is Rosemary Hunziker. And really what they are looking at is the foundational technologies that help with engineering approaches for developing tissue constructs. They look at scaffolds, they look at biomaterials, and they're really looking at some novel biomaterial funding opportunities which should be coming out this year. They are looking at manipulation and expansion of stem cells as well as bioreactors and systems for cell and tissue production, including the scalability of those. NHLBI is enormously interested, as some of the funding has suggested in the early parts of the symposia, in regenerative medicine, but specifically in looking at the way that they are working with advanced technologies in surgery. And so this is just a very brief portfolio analysis that I did on their regenerative rehab program, and it really does include a lot of tissue engineering and especially surgical techniques to enhance the implantation of stem cells. And their program contact is listed as Martha Lundberg. The other big dog for bone, mostly in craniofacial, but they will also support some basic bone programs, is at NIDCR, the Dental and Craniofacial Research Institute, which you would think like, they do regen? Of course they do regen, because they want to regrow bone for the face, right? So they do quite a bit in this in tissue, how to get the engineered constructs into native host tissue, so how do you reintegrate those, mechanistic studies, and also endogenous host tissue healing and regeneration. And Nadia, who collaborates with Lloyd and I a lot, is incredibly experienced with bone regen. NINDS also has an incredibly robust repair and plasticity section. Timothy Levote is the major backer of this research at NINDS, though a lot of the programs can cross program officials, but they look at a ton of stem cell research, and they do it from basic biology to interventions with nervous system disorders. So if you are looking at something that would impact nerve, obviously, or a neurologic condition, they are also very into the cerebral organoids right now, and then looking at some of the other cell therapies that can alleviate symptoms in neurodegenerative diseases. And strikingly, even the National Institute of Deafness and Communication Disorders has a significant interest in some of the regenerative techniques that you all have talked about. And this one's fairly busy because I got this from them this morning, so I apologize for that. But they really are looking at a number of things in terms of tissue on a chip, microenvironments, and anything that can impact sensory stem cell, or they're also looking a lot at vocal fold paralysis. So looking at how do regenerative techniques impact vocal fold paralysis for things like spasmodic dysphonia. And finally, my program. So that's good, because I know that one the best. what we really are looking at is repair and plasticity in body tissues and the adaptation and rehabilitation mechanisms. And so what we want to see is new strategies to promote plasticity and adaptation. Obviously, that's fairly broad, tissue repair and recovery, and then potentially developmental issues. So when can we promote plasticity for children with some of these techniques? And these are not techniques that are generally applied there. Our program contacts are Ralph Nitkin and a new staff member that we've just added who has this tremendous interest in spinal cord. He did a lot of work in stem cells and spinal cord, Joe Bonner. And just to say that all of these programs that I just mentioned, they're primarily investigator initiated, right? So we're not going to tell you how to approach the problem. We're not going to tell you what mechanism you should use, except if you're using a training mechanism. The biggest thing that I will tell you is to reach out to the program official, right? They'll be able to tell you, if you can give them some specific hypotheses and aims, where to aim. If maybe you're at the wrong institute, they'll tell you that. But please do reach out because I think we give you a lot of good guidance and can kind of help you navigate the system. So lastly, I'll just talk about two other things to be aware of. One is the Cell Manufacturing Consortium. The primary sponsor for this is the National Institute for Standards and Technologies. And what they are really trying to do is get to large-scale manufacture for high-quality cells. Just to follow this, because it will affect some of your efforts. And the manufacturing piece of this is also extending into the DoD. And it was mentioned briefly, but Army is one of them, the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute, and the other is sponsored by NIST, and it's the NIMBLE. And this is really sort of the innovation in manufacturing it's such a big word, biopharmaceuticals, and that also includes looking at emerging product classes like cell-based therapies. So, you know, looking at the manufacturing environment really is important. I'm just going to let you know that if you're going to do a clinical trial, you really need to talk to us because we have all new policies and forms. The only other thing to tell you is that we do have this new resource, which is pretty cool. So I've been telling everybody about it because I'm using it a lot, and I think you might find it useful. If you take your abstract of your project and you put it in what's called the assisted referral tool, it will return to you the top 10 study sections that would match that abstract. And so you can get a sense in looking at those panels if those folks are really well matched to your proposal. And it's been really interesting because it's turning up review sections that I never even heard of, which is good because it gives you more options, but it also arms you when you talk to your program official. So that's just one that I'm throwing in because I think it's fun. It's almost like Netflix, but for study section. And then the other resources, obviously you people are aware of AR3T, but we do also, and they are out in the hall, fund the Medical Rehabilitation Research Resource Network, and Marcus is here also from REACT, and he'll be doing a session tomorrow. We have other infrastructure networks for neuromodulation, for large data, for motor stimulation, and for commercialization. So for those of you that are developing technologies, looking for commercial applications, this is a group that does not take your intellectual property and gives you some advice on how to commercialize your technology. And so those are free to you. We pay a lot of money for them. Your tax dollars at work, use them because you can. The other is if you have students working with you, I would highly encourage you next summer to have them apply to the training and grantsmanship for rehabilitation research if you're in that area. There's some very experienced mentors who go to that and help you get your proposal in really good shape for submission and give you good career advice. And then we also have a number of K-12 programs that are still underway, one of which is in rehabilitation and restorative neuroscience, which does have a bit of an emphasis on some of the stem cell technologies. So with that, I think I will stop and we can, I guess, bring people back up and take questions.